Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Level Up with Laiken. If you are looking for tangible strategies to scale up your practice, please hit subscribe. Every week I interview a new lawyer who has successfully implemented the strategies they're going to share with you today. And today, I know I say, first of all, I've been gone for a while. So let me just start there and explain that. I have had to take a pause, and I will be taking another pause after this episode because the courtrooms have opened, trials are now rolling out, which means that my trial calendar has been a little crazy. I start trial, this morning, according to the ex parte. It's now September 29th. So I will be gone during that period, but I had to pop back in here and get an episode in because I have the most special guest today, Jennifer Johnson. I did not know you before, and I am what's funny is I was telling Emily that I was starting to wonder if I should continue doing these episodes because they started to feel like pressure when you've got so much other going on. Yeah. And then when I was talking to you, it reminded me why I do this. So thank you for breathing new life back in here. Yes. I was like, oh yes, it's so good for my soul.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you why you did it, and now I know.
Yeah, I did. Well, you know what? I started doing it. It started off as just a GHQ Zoom call because I just opened my firm and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah. And I read this book by Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, and he talks about like goal setting and having an accountability group. So I reached out to the peeps in GHQ. It was like, well, we've got an accountability group right here. And then it just morphed into this. And the purpose of this is really to give other people who were in our shoes when we started our firms, who are afraid or have questions, or even people who are just looking to build their firms, like why reinvent the wheel, right? I have learned so many tips on this show, just interviewing different people. It's so, I learned from it. Hopefully, people have reached out that have watched YouTube and told me that they've gained a lot of value from it. So we're good somewhere.
I mean, you don't have enough time to make all the mistakes there are to be made. I mean, so why not? I mean, people say it's good to learn from your own mistakes, but it's way better to learn from somebody else's mistakes.
Isn't it? Yeah. Right? Isn't that's the wise person versus the smart person. But I want you to introduce yourself and your firm and just give the GHQ people and the YouTube world a little bit of background of who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I'm very creative in that I call my firm the Law Office of Jennifer R. Johnson. I'm located in Irvine. I've been a lawyer for 29 years. It was a second career for me. And I was formerly an ICU nurse.
But because of your career as an ICU nurse, you specialize in medical malpractice.
Right. 100% of my practice is medical malpractice, which anybody that practices law in California knows that space, knows that you have to be certifiably crazy and not greedy and really passionate about that area of law because it's incredibly challenging.
And expensive. Very expensive, very challenging, very hard because your burden is much higher than my typical car accident premises liability burden. I mean, you literally have to get a roster of doctors together that are willing to point the finger at other doctors. And I started in med mal defense, and that's hard. Like, a lot of doctors don't like to do that. I mean, lawyers don't even like to do it. I don't like criticizing other lawyers.
It's uncomfortable. Yeah, it is uncomfortable. But I mean, I think that for me, it's really a calling. I say it often, but it's more than a way to put food on the table. It's really... It's even more than a passion. I mean, it's really what I'm meant to do and what my calling is in the practice of law, but also in life. So that's the way I approach it, and that's, I think, what has given me the stamina to keep going almost now 10 years and having my own firm.
Which is great because every med mal call I get goes to you. I don't want to do it. But I want to break down your story and what we talked about on the phone because your story is very unique and very non-unique at the same time. Like a lot of the struggles that you have faced that felt very unique to you are not only, and I told you, I was like, I think we're living parallel lives, right?
Right?
Like there's struggles that I experienced, and there are also struggles that a lot of other, especially the female law firm owners that I spoke to, a lot of them struggled with as well. And you had mentioned identity, which I think is that hit different for me. That's what my son says. Mom, that just hit different. That hit different for me because I experienced it. I had a prior guest named Carla Waymeyer, who talked about her own identity metamorphosis when she was going through the practice of law. And then another thing I want to talk about is you said one of the best things you ever did was take a sabbatical. And I don't know what is going on with COVID, but I literally met a woman in a sushi restaurant who talked about her taking a sabbatical and how valuable it was for her. I was even considering it for a minute. You grew up in a small town.
Right.
Like, did everybody know everybody?
Well, yeah, there were 600 people in the first small town I grew up in, North Dakota, Kulm, Kulm, North Dakota, and then the second small town where we moved when I was in junior high had, I think, 800 people, Newell, South Dakota. So, yeah.
And your dad was the local preacher.
My dad was the local preacher, and so as I was sharing when we were talking on the phone, when I first saw the movie Footloose, I called my sister. I said, they made a movie about our lives. I can't believe it. This is exactly how we grew up. No dances, no, swimming on Sundays, no movies. I mean, it was a lot of just really, and my parents are wonderful people, but it was a different, it was different.
They were very religious, right?
Extremely
Are
religious.
They still?
My father's passed away, rest his soul, and my mother is still alive, and they're very spiritual people, and love them dearly. But it was a difficult way to grow up because I think that my dad was a pastor of a fairly large church in a small community, so like 1/3 of the community went to my dad's church, and so
they all knew you, and they were all watching you.
Right. Okay. So we were very much in the spotlight to, try to be an example to everybody and to be kind to everybody, make everybody want to come back to church, and so I think that's where I developed some interpersonal skills that have actually served me really well.
Yeah.
So they'd want to come back to church.
Right.
So
and then you, your shoes are fabulous, by the way.
Thank you.
So then you end up going to college, right?
Right.
And you were homecoming queen too. Because I think that plays a part in the story here. You're homecoming queen.
Well, in all fairness, I went to a high school that had 49 students in my graduating class, and I don't know how many of them were women, but, the competition wasn't, they were wonderful people.
Don't you talk about Jennifer that way. You earned that title. You're a homecoming queen.
But I was a homecoming queen, and but I wasn't able to go to the dance because in the days I grew up, my parents felt like it was a sin to go to the dances, or we couldn't go to dances. So anyway, went from there to college in Springfield, Missouri, and I was a music major. My whole identity growing up had been playing the piano. I accompanied everybody and everything in high school, played in church, led the church, youth choir, and that was my whole identity. But at the same time, as I shared with you, I was struggling from maybe age 15 till maybe my late 20s with a very severe eating disorder. I was struggling with anorexia as well as bulimia, and at that time they were not well-known entities, and so there wasn't a lot of treatment that was available. And
so you had to battle this by yourself.
So I was pretty much battling this by myself, and really was distracted, I think, from that eating disorder only by focusing on my education, if that makes sense. So, I was practicing piano 3 hours a day for my major, and I also played the trombone, by the way. So if you ever want a little trombone solo here on the show, I'm your girl. I have a trombone at home. But I think that eating disorder then led to me wanting to study psychology, because I thought, oh, well, if I only learn about psychology, then I will be able to overcome this eating disorder, because I desperately didn't want to suffer from that. But so I switched my major and got a degree in psychology with a minor in music education, and found myself with absolutely no marketable skills after finishing this degree. And I was working sometimes 2, sometimes 3 different waitress jobs just to make my basic bills for my car insurance and whatnot. And it was against that backdrop that my parents said, well, you have to get a marketable skill. You just go get a marketable skill. And I said, well, I don't know what I want to do. And since my mother is a nurse, they said, well, why don't you just become a nurse? And so I did. I went to nursing school at a community college and ended up getting my AA in nursing, which allowed me to sit for the state boards in the state of Arizona. And I went right to the intensive care unit as a brand new graduate nurse.
Okay. So now you're a nurse.
Yeah.
And that wasn't enough for you.
You know, I always thought that it was a stepping stone. I mean, I did have pretty severe or pretty big student loans, that I had to keep deferring. So I always thought that by going to nursing school, I could defer my student loans and I could get a marketable skill, but I always thought I'll do something in addition to that. That was my mindset.
Because you knew nursing wasn't your purpose.
I felt kind of like an outsider looking in, although what really turned me on about nursing was just being able to interface with people, especially in the ICU, that were facing life and death and having the ability to really make a difference in that person's life.
But still, even when I think about, there are nurses and then there are ICU nurses, right? Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But even if my mom was like, hey, you should go become a nurse, I'm like, oh my God, the sight of blood, or like cerebrospinous fluid,
That's a big word.
I know, so med mal defense. Yeah. So I had to practice that, I kid you not, for like 3 days. I could not say that word. But you obviously don't have that kind of reaction, no?
I was that little girl, cleaning up after my little brothers or sisters would, be sick and throw up.
Because you had a huge family, right?
Yeah,
you came from 6?
From 6 brothers
and
sisters. I'm the oldest daughter.
Okay.
So, yeah, oldest daughter. We're spread out over 18 years, and so...
But are you number 1?
I have an older brother.
Okay, you're number 2.
I have an older brother. I'm number 2. Yeah, so that never ever bothered me, but what really, really I loved about nursing, even though I didn't feel that it was my be-all, end-all career, I loved the fact that as an ICU nurse, I could be with a patient for 12 hours, and oftentimes these people were struggling, to stay alive, straddling life and death, and I could make a difference for that person.
Right.
And it's the very same thing that really turns me on about the practice of law, especially plaintiff med mal. Oftentimes the people that I represent are going through easily the worst thing that they've ever been through.
Yeah.
And I can help them to get through that pain, but not only that, Ashley, to find a purpose for their pain, and to not only bring justice to themselves, but to get on board with the idea, let's make sure this doesn't happen to somebody else.
Right.
And people can endure a lot of pain if there's a purpose. And so that was this very same thing in the ICU, really relating to people in that very vulnerable time period in their life. That is the same thing that really motivates me in the practice of law, is representing victims.
So let's get there, because it wasn't like you went to college knowing that law was down the road for you, right? Like, you literally had never even met a lawyer.
I met the very first time I met a lawyer was the very first day I started law school.
But why law school? Like, how did you go from nurse to, I know something else out there is meant for me, I don't know what it is, but then how did you make that transition?
Well, in nursing school, really was the only time I really contemplated the practice of law. And
that's because you learned about law in
we
nursing.
learned about the medical malpractice aspects of being a registered nurse. And I remember sitting in this big conference, or this big lecture hall, and just getting this flash like, wow, what if I could be a lawyer? And then I immediately got just flooded with this fear, like, oh, you're not smart enough. You are not smart enough to be a lawyer. Lawyers are really, really smart, and that is not you. And I felt like I was, personable, and I felt like I was, back in those days, pretty, and I felt very insecure about my intellectual abilities. And then I had been practicing this, I'd been trying not to let my fears control me, and as you know, fear is such a great motivator, right? I mean, so much of what I've done in my life was motivated by fear. But I was trying even back then to not let my fears control me. So the minute I got that fear, I thought, I'm going to try. If I can't do it, if these voices telling me that I'm not smart enough are right, I at least am not going to go to my grave feeling like I was too afraid to try.
Okay.
So, and of course now I know you don't have to be eccentrically brilliant. You just have to work your little tush off, and you have to really be determined. But back then I really went to law school kind of on a dare to myself that I had what it took to do that.
Okay. So you go to law school, and your first class is the first time you ever even met a lawyer.
The first day of orientation. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then you obviously make it through and you graduate law school. And then where did you start your career?
Yeah, so I started out at a small, it was actually not that small, but a medical malpractice defense firm in Palm Springs, a firm called Tuverson and Hilliard, and Deborah DeBoer. Shout out to Deb DeBoer and Jeff Keene, who were my first bosses. And they gave me an opportunity as a med mal defense lawyer. But even then, it was interesting to even get out there. I had to borrow money from the firm. I borrowed $5,000 because my transmission had exploded, and I just rented a tiny little apartment in Palm Springs and worked there for about 9 years. I did 8 or 9 years, and then I did a small stint at a med mal firm in Santa Ana, La Follette Johnson. And
tiny little firm.
Yeah,
nothing little
firm.
Yeah, firm.
No, right? Tiny little firm, yeah. And but then I ended up working on fen-phen cases, which was one of the first mass torts after breast implants. And our firm, my late best friend and law partner, Pat Carmichael, was the liaison counsel for physicians. And I was helping her, and so I would see, these big firms, Lopez Hodes and Robinson Calcagni, and the various firms working on the plaintiff side. And as a result of that, I ended up getting invited to one of the Christmas parties, I believe, for Lopez Hodes. And I had just been to our Christmas party for our firm, which was, our nice Mimi's lunch or what have you, and went to this huge spread at, the Ritz-Carlton in black tie and 5-course. And I thought, I need to work here.
This is what I want to do.
But more important than that, I think I saw that they were doing all this med mal and mass tort work, but I think at that time they had one part-time woman, I think, and they didn't have any nurse lawyers. And I thought, they need me. And so they weren't even hiring, but I decided I was going to work there. And it took me an entire year, but eventually I got them to hire me.
And you did that for how long?
Did that for 10 years, and then that firm ended up closing down, and eternally grateful to Lopez Hodes and their partners for what I learned there. And then when the firm closed down, I was at that point about a 18-year lawyer, and I was looking for the next opportunity. And
when did you stop nursing? Did you stop nursing when you passed the bar?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So by that time, how long had you been a nurse?
I was only a nurse full-time for 2.5 to 3 years, I think, and then I worked out through law school.
Do you maintain your license?
I have an inactive license in Arizona.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And has your nursing background helped you in your career sounds like a stupid question, but I'm just curious.
No, it's been just crazy. I mean, it helped me. I don't think I've ever said this out loud, but it helped me 2 times at 2 specific times in my career more than others. When I was first a lawyer, was very insecure about and didn't know much about the practice of law, and it really gave me that in with the doctors I represented, as well as with the experts. I mean, it was just really...
They felt like they were talking to their own family.
Right, and I just, I had some swag and some confidence because...
you could speak their language.
I could speak their language. And then the other time, and this has just been the gift that never stops giving, when I started my own firm in 2012, I heard a talk. I would think I was up at CAOC in San Francisco, and I just happened, I don't believe there's coincidences, but I say that sarcastically, I heard a talk about marketing, and there was this bar graph, and it showed the most trusted professions to the least trusted professions, and it went over several different slides. I mean, because there was all these professions, and at the very top, the most trusted professions,
doctors and nurses,
doctors and nurses, and clergy.
Oh,
and clergy.
Okay. You got all that.
And so I'm all that. And then at the very bottom, there were used car salesmen, and then lawyers.
And wait, were we below the used car salesman?
They were neck and neck is all I remember.
Yes.
So, like, there's a bar graph out there somewhere from 2010 or 11.
That's hysterical.
And I just thought, well, in my marketing, I'm starting my own firm. I need to talk about my nursing background.
I need to bridge that gap.
And then I need to talk about I'm a preacher's kid. And I need to talk about things that will make...
But I never sold a car.
I have one, but I haven't sold it. So the other time my nursing background has just been invaluable, has been in my marketing, because people, number one, nurses are known for their compassion. And I think I know that compassion is a great strength. It's also a weakness because your greatest strength, of course, can often be a weakness as well.
Right.
In that I don't think you can care too much about what people are going through, but sometimes I've been known to help clients from getting evicted because they can't pay their rent, and helping them, just like if I see a need, I'm going to meet a need. I mean, that's just me. I just am that way. But nurses are known for being compassionate, and I often have said that people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care.
Yeah.
And so I think that that mantra has been really helpful, and it comes out of my nursing background.
So, because I want to make sure we have time to cover this, because this was compelling. So, I mean, the whole thing is compelling, but this added something for me personally that I think will translate well to other people. When the firm closed, you then were at a crossroads, right? And it was at that point that you took some time off?
I took a year off.
What did you do during that time? Did you travel? Would you recommend it?
Oh, totally. I mean, for number one, it really made me face myself, and I had a complete identity crisis. I mean,
I feel like that was all COVID for me.
Right? I know, right? I mean, I just felt like if I'm not working, if I'm not, working every day as hard as I can and working on the weekends, then
who are you?
Who am I? And then the other thing, I've always been one to make my own money, and so I would wake up in the middle of the night like, oh my gosh, where's my paycheck? I don't have a paycheck. And of course, I was living on money I had saved, but it really made me face myself. And during that time period, I was looking for work, and it really was kind of a rude awakening, because I had last looked for work as a 7 or 8 year lawyer. It seems under a 10-year anyway.
It's a different world at that level.
Totally different world.
Because a lot of people don't want to pay you what you would be worth at 18 to 20 years.
Right. And then I also wasn't finding people that wanted to start a firm, because I thought, well, and by the way, I had zero desire to start my own firm, to have my name on the door. I would have been happy carrying some, older guy's brief in Armani suits, briefcase. I mean, I literally was very comfortable in that role. I didn't have any need to have my name on the door of anything. In fact, I was so afraid to do that I literally took a job at a defense firm, not even a med-mal defense firm. I could hardly get interviews. I mean, I was literally looking all the time. Took a job earning what I would have earned like 15 years ago, and I would have been defending like Dish Network or something like that. I mean, it had nothing to do, but I was so fearful that I found a way, like financially, I could make this work. And then when it got down to it, when it got like a week from when I was supposed to start the job, I just couldn't do it. It just,
something inside of you?
Something inside of me would not let me, it wouldn't let me
show up.
No, it was more like this. Like everything I've done in my life, the good, the bad, the ugly, has all kind of built. I'm always moving forward. I'm always moving upward. I just have that inside of me. I believe that I'm always going from one level to the next. And it felt like this was going about 15 levels backwards.
Yeah.
It felt like it's not like
it wasn't consistent with your path.
No, it's not like my nursing, then my defense, then law school, then, med-mal defense, then plaintiff work, then my own law firm. It wasn't forward. It didn't have.
There was no trajectory.
No trajectory.
So you didn't do it.
So I called, and it was totally awkward moment, but I just said, I'm just sorry, I just can't do this. And I saw the woman that I had that had hired me, and then I turned down the job. I saw her actually 2 weeks ago at an event, and it was really fun to see her.
Had you ever worked for a woman before?
My first boss, Deb DeBoer, yeah. So then the only option was to start my own law firm, and I did it literally kicking and screaming. I did it because I didn't see any other options, and I had absolutely no business doing it.
Yeah.
I had no business acumen. Yeah. Shout out to Sean Burke, who I remember I sat down with at Pete's Coffee, and he explained to me, well, you need a trust account, and you need, your state bar, and you need your insurance, and, gave me a checklist. But it was, I think, aside from facing my eating disorder, I think it was the scariest thing I've ever done was to start my own practice.
Okay. I think we can all relate to that. Mm-hmm. It's still scary. Am I kidding?
Right.
But I think, so you start your own firm, right? And you had a reputation by that point. You had taken some time off. You had really identified what was important to you, your purpose. And then now you said you didn't make any money for 2 years. It was 2 years before you settled the case, right?
Well, it was actually almost 3 years. I started with 0 cases, and my first case settled at the end of my second year. So it was almost at the end of my second year.
Well, because Methanol is also, that's a typical lifespan for a regular PI case, but Methanol is different. It takes even longer.
It takes longer.
Those cases,
Yeah, you have to have the doctor's written consent. Every case is a street fight, and in that particular case, my plaintiff, it was a general damage only case, a 250 case soaking wet, and my plaintiff died right before trial of reasons unrelated to why I was suing, and I was already $65,000 into the case.
So it's no longer wrongful death.
Right. Yeah. So, but I did eke out, with the help of my brilliant brief writer, I eked out a way to force a case to settle. It settled for $150,000.
Did they know she or he had died?
They did know.
Okay.
Yeah, they knew. Yeah, but I was able actually to, it's probably getting in the weeds a little bit, but I was able to amend the complaint to add punitive damages under a case called Goodstein. Mm-hmm.
And who was now your plaintiff? The estate?
The husband is a wrongful death plaintiff, and the consortium plaintiff is, well, no, I'm sorry. I was actually amending to add punitive damages on the underlying case, and the husband's loss of consortium ended up being the anchor for that. And I did not have wrongful death. I absolutely did not. Yeah, because she died of unrelated reasons.
So, and then this is the part that is, so you've got your own firm going, you're surviving, but then you get a case that you turn down. And, you mentioned that you have a policy that if you are going to turn down a case, you call the client yourself and you explain it to them. And in this particular case, it changed your mind, right?
Yeah. So every year after that first case, you know, I would be on the verge of almost quitting. It's like every couple months, just because of how far and few and far between the med mal settlements were at the beginning. And then I learned, Ashley, over time that all this freaking out, all this going down this rabbit hole of fear and worrying about how I'm going to make it, it's wasted, because I always do make it.
Yeah, like, isn't that funny? I read it was like a meme that says, if you're worried about what's going to happen in the future, just remember that your success rate for surviving bad days is 100%, right? Like,
I know.
And you had said, you're like, after having a pattern of things getting really scary, and then when they get really scary and things look really grim, something great happens.
Yeah.
Right. And now you are learning to just trust the process.
Trust the process. And, I just have a lot of faith. And I know that, in fact, if somebody needs help, even if I don't really have the means, I will still help them, because I believe I will be taken care of.
Yeah. And you always are, right?
And I believe that. And so after freaking out for a couple years, like being on the verge of being freaked out for a couple years, and even after that, I would learn that, hey, almost when I think I can't keep going, then something will happen. I'll get a case settled. Money will come in. And so then I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could just forego all that freaking out, because I am taken care of, and I do always make it. And it's like, sometimes you feel like that trapeze artist, because before you grab you have to let go of the one bar before you grab the next one.
Right.
And for a split second, sometimes it seems like a lot of seconds, you're suspended in midair, and that's not comfortable.
Right.
But you have to let go to grab that next bar. And that was just that whole image, and just getting the mindset that, hey, I don't have to be distracted by these fears that I'm not going to be able to make it. I don't have to. I can choose not to be distracted by that.
That is the most powerful thing you've said. And I was literally having this conversation with a friend who I know she wants to start her own firm, but she is paralyzed by the fear. And I remember, I just wish this whole thing would disappear. But like when I wanted to start my own firm, I did this whole thing where I have to research everything, right? So I'm reading the books and I'm listening to the podcasts, and I stumbled upon a statistic that if you got to know that a certain number of firms are going to be unsuccessful and they're going to close their doors, and you want to avoid failure, and this is how you avoid failure, and blah, 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 blah. You know what I call bullshit, and here's why. Yeah. What I told her, she's like, what if I don't make it? I said, it is impossible for you to fail. I just want you to understand that right now. And I really wish this whole thing of, like, statistically speaking, if you open a firm and you close it and go back to work for someone else, because of reputation and blah, 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 it's really hard to do it a second time. Like, you might as well just not, right? I literally read this, and it was a book on how to start your own law firm. And that was in the book. And now looking back on it, it's such bullshit, because I really feel like if you are committed, like now, even, and I follow the same practice that you do. I'm like, okay, it's getting real scary, but because it's really scary, I know something big is about to happen. Now what's even worse are just these days, right? Because these days I'm not seeing anything happen. It's when it goes down where I'm like, okay, something big is about to happen. This is a good sign, right? And I am truly convinced now that if you were, like, I would find it really, really difficult to go work for someone else now that I've had the pressure to make the decisions myself, and I've had the pressure to feed my children myself, and I've had, all the financial pressure has fallen on me. One of the things about that is it makes you bulletproof. Like, there's really not a whole lot.
I mean, I can't say that I'm fearless 100%, but I fear a lot less.
But your perspective is shifted.
Right.
Like now, and I was, believe it or not, you mentioned Robinson Calcagni. The trial that I'm doing, Michelle West of Robinson Calcagni is my co-counsel. And she said something, she's like, I used to panic about everything. And she's like, there's just no point. She's like, I don't panic anymore. And I think that is so important, because then you have people like BB Fell, who was a self-admitted micromanager and stressed out about everything, and then her daughter gets cancer.
Right.
And now
Right.
she's like, it totally shifted my perspective, like things that were a big deal. And I literally was talking to Michelle this morning, and I was like, you know what, Michelle, we're not going to panic, because believe it or not, like a lot of the things that we're stressing about, we're going to deal with in the courtroom at the time of trial. Like it's going to get dealt with. So don't worry. Like, you know, you can't. And I think the whole point is, and what I was trying to tell my friend is, if you want to start your own firm, and it is, by the way, in my opinion, the only way you will ever have total control over your future and your destiny. If you want to do it, you don't have to worry about this idea of failure, because you literally cannot fail. The people who technically fail are either the ones who are messing with their IOLTA accounts and stealing, but we all know don't do that, right? Yeah. Or they're the ones who literally make an affirmative decision to give up on themselves.
To quit.
Yeah.
I mean, I was speaking this morning to my brother, and I was just talking to him about these very issues. And, you know, I just, over the years, have just refused to give up. I mean, I just have refused to give up. And it sounds like you've done the same thing.
You are stuck with a point. Like, it's almost good where you reach that fork in the road where, you know, the firm closed and you're like, well, what am I going to do now, right? And I'm at this, you know, level of my career. It's going to be hard. What am I going to do? Those things feel like dark moments, but they're really blessings in disguise.
Yeah, I mean, and my big deal is I want to have a life of significance. I mean, I want to make a difference in people's lives, and that's my marketing, but that's how I really feel. I mean, whether it's in nursing or law or I want to make a difference in people's lives, and you do. Well, thank you for saying that. But one thing that really helps me, I was telling my brother this morning, I just hold my firm very loosely in my hands. And I mean, if there's some other way that I can make a bigger difference in people's lives and in my community, I'll go do that. I mean, I'm not like, you know, this firm I'm going to have forever. I mean, I don't feel that way. It's just like right now, what's in front of me, this is the most effective way I find that I can make a difference to bring justice, not only for people, but to make money and to give back to my community. And so, you know, the big overarching thing for me is I want my life to be significant. I want to make a difference in people's lives, and I want to make a difference in my community. And however I can most effectively do that is how I want to do that.
And you know what's funny is I think that I was watching a segment, it might have been TikTok. I have a TikTok thing. And it was Oprah, and she was saying, your life whispers to you all the time. So you need to make sure that you are able to open up and listen and receive messages, because your life is whispering to you all the time. Like, for those who feel lost or they don't have a roadmap, just listen. And that moment when you got offered the defense job, right? Something inside of you was like, nope, like it couldn't quite get comfortable in your gut, right? And for me, I feel like it's such a gift, but it's so effing annoying sometimes. It's because I'm like, no, I want to take the easier road, and my gut's like, no, we're not going to do that. And I'm like, but please, like, I'm really tired. And they're like, no, I don't care if you're tired. We're going to do it the hard way, right? Like, that's just like the way that I do it, right? And, you know, my firm, like when I opened my firm, COVID hit like a couple months later, and I literally fell to my knees in my backyard, and I was like, are you kidding?
I know, right?
How much do you think I can take? And then like my kids were home, and I was trying to call, adjusters, and my kids were fighting in the background, and I was like, is this a joke? Is there like a camera? Like, is this a joke? Like, what? And then there's like this little voice that's like, nope, you're gonna learn from this. Just keep going. Yeah. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be. And there's a couple moments where I literally was like, maybe I should just go get a job. Like, I know I can go get a job. And I really feel like you have learned to listen to that voice when your life is speaking to you, that tells you, like, I love the fact that you want justice. I love the fact that you want your life to mean something. Mm-hmm. For me, I'm in the game for justice. That's why I switched from defense to plaintiff. But I also wanted to be a present parent. I also wanted to control my commute time. I wanted to control my own schedule. I wanted to be the one that picked my kids up from school at 3 o'clock, which I no longer do. By the way, I hired somebody to do that because it's not realistic. But I mean, like, I want to be able to go to my kids' games, right? So those were my motivating factors for taking control of my own life and opening my own firm. And even in the beginning when I was like, shit, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to jump and here we go. Like, and I'm still there, and you're still there. Even when you left your firm, you left the firm and decided to open your own firm, saying, I don't even care to own a firm. I have no business acumen. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just gonna go get a little bit of advice. Like, hope this works out. But you're still there.
But I am. The funny thing is, like, at first it almost feels irresponsible because it feels like you feel like, where's my business plan? Yeah.
I should have had a savings plan. I should be opening when I have a fully staffed office. I didn't have any of that either.
It feels
reckless.
It feels reckless and irresponsible. Yeah, and it feels like, but then if you can learn to just
roll with the punches,
go away from that anxiety. I mean, the one thing I would say too, I think that one of the biggest things that helped me is I just kind of got unfiltered. I mean, I went through those, and what I mean by that is I went through those first couple years of having my firm and not making money and having so much shame, and shame can't really exist if it's out in the open, right? I mean, I think it's Brene Brown who talks about that.
Vulnerability and all that.
Yeah, and all that. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't talking about this to anybody. And meanwhile, I'm burning through money. I'm not selling cases. And I was getting so discouraged. And I started this comparing thing, which is always a losing proposition because there's always somebody more successful than you. And that way you could, I mean, when you see them, you feel inferior. And then there's somebody that you're probably doing better than, and then you feel like prideful. So it's always a losing proposition.
And you wonder what you're doing wrong.
Right. And so I would go, look at that guy. He's not even smart. And look at her. And what's wrong with me? Finally, I went to an OCTLA Christmas lunch at the end of my second year. And I just became unfiltered. I remember I sat down and I talked to somebody that I hardly even knew about how discouraged I was and how I thought I'd made a mistake and how I felt like I was just going to give up and quit. And this older gentleman just looked at me and he goes, you need to get over yourself.
Yeah.
He said, we've all been there and done that. You've got this trial coming up. Maybe you have to pivot and get somebody in to help you with the cost. I mean, he said, you need to develop a different mindset is basically what he was saying. And that just gave me so much hope. And I think sometimes in our circles, I think we're slow to talk about what the struggles really have been to get to where we're going.
Especially with social media and the marketing that we see.
Right.
Like, we're not seeing the real story.
But see, we get encouraged not by, I mean, success has encouraged us, but when you know the backstory, then you go, they were fighting that and they accomplished that. Well, maybe
you're so right, because people literally will rely on the fact that Oprah got fired from her first job, and then we also look at the people who didn't make it until they were in their 40s and 50s and 60s. Those struggles are
so your weaknesses, the strengths that you have. Like, if you just talk about your strengths, everybody goes, well, whoopee, good for you, so happy for you, you're all that, and a bag of chips or whatever. But if you talk about your weaknesses and you're vulnerable,
now you're human,
then people go, wow, and you did that. And I talked down at La de Gras and just was really unfiltered about the struggles I had to get through those first couple years. And somebody came up to me and said, I felt like you were telling us a story of a book, and you were at chapter 12 and I'm at chapter 5, and you just gave me hope that I can actually make it. And thank you for sharing what you went through. Because I mean, I think sometimes we really just see or talk about the good things, and I think we need to talk about our weaknesses, because then it really does encourage other people.
I agree with you, and sometimes you'll get a little bit of Kella. I moderated a panel with Kella.
Good for you.
And it was a spine panel, and it was like medicine for lawyers. And I opened it because I was doing like the preliminary, like here's the spine, here's the anatomy, and I had a neurosurgeon, Dr. Fox, who like broke it down, and it was great. But I mean, I talk a lot, whatever, right? Like what? And I was asking like other panelists questions, and because I mean, I was legitimately curious. But one of the things I said was, for a lot of you lawyers out there who already know the medicine, just consider this a refresher, because I know there were questions I had as a first year PI attorney that I was too embarrassed to ask because I felt stupid. Like the difference between a herniation and a protrusion and an extrusion, like I didn't know, but it seemed like everybody else did, so I was scared to ask, right? Yeah. And I said, I want to make sure that, you know, if I I want to go over the basic anatomy of the cervical and lumbar spine, so in case any of you guys have those questions you're afraid to ask, you'll get your answers. You'll get your answers today. And I said, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Fox. And one of the panelists, and I'm not sure he realized the mic picked him up, he said, yeah, that would probably be a good idea to turn over the mic, because apparently he didn't like what I was saying or something. And I heard it and I was like, wow, that was rude. But during the break, a woman walked up to me and she's like, you know, I just became a PI attorney. And she says, I was a DA. And she was like, I'm really glad you said that, because I'm literally living that right now. Like, I'm afraid to ask questions. And she's like, and you did answer. Yeah. I was like, sister, take my phone number. Yeah. Whatever you need, you call me. So even though he was being critical, there actually was somebody in the audience who was like, I literally came here for this entire reason, because I am embarrassed to ask that question, and I didn't know, and now I know. So thank you, you know? And I say that to say that even in the face of judgment, it is more important to speak your truth, because it is more valuable to me to have someone come to me and say, hey, that hit home for me, thank you, than it is to have some successful male trial attorney be like, oh God, she's talking too much, please pass the mic. Yeah. What I had to say was of value to somebody, and that's more important than his judgment. Totally, yeah. So I agree with you. People, and we had this conversation internally at GHQ, where we always see like the big, massive trial results. Yeah. What about the people that lost? Right. Don't you learn more from the losses than you do from the wins, right? Why are we not talking about the trials that we lose? Yeah, and I mean the struggle and the fight. I mean, it even goes down to the cases that we don't take. I mean, I consider it as much of an important part of what I do to look at a case. And by the way, med mal cases are a needle in a haystack. They are. I mean, I probably look at 150 cases before I take one. And so, but I always try to explain to a person why I'm not taking their case. And especially if it's a death case, because there again, I'm at that critical point in their life where they've lost a loved one, a child, a parent, a spouse. And they want to put it somewhere. And and to explain to them why I don't think this is a case is not wasted time. Yeah. I don't get paid for it. Yeah. Because my practice is all contingency. But that in and of itself is showing kindness and compassion when you take the time. When you take the time to explain, and that of course, led to what we were talking about earlier. The biggest cases of my career that I settled in COVID, my first 8-figure settlements, came out of a case that I turned down, but resurrected, took out of the shred pile, because I actually took the time and called the family to explain why I wasn't taking the case. And then they said, well, Dr. So-and-so said that this is a case and this should never have happened. And I looked at it, or I talked to him on the phone. I said, if Dr. So-and-so will tell me that very same thing, which I knew he wouldn't, I will reconsider. And lo and behold, he did. He did. And that led to me taking the biggest case of my career, which led to a second case, which led to a third case, and led to my first 8-figure settlements and winning the Top Gun award from the OCTLA. Well, let's not forget that also almost financially killed you. And if you had lost that, it would have wiped you out. So you did what I've heard a lot of, and I'm sure that at some point I'll be at that stage in my career where you are rolling on faith. Yeah. You're rolling on faith. Like, the risk is that big that it could have wiped you out, and you are rolling on faith. But those cases, again, I was the fourth lawyer to look at the lead case. So 3 other firms turned down the lead case. I turned down the lead case. Then I took it out of the shred pile and ran with it.
But I mean, I just felt like there were so many miracles in that case. I mean, but I was in a position where I needed miracles. It's like, if I didn't get a miracle, I was going to be sunk. Like, I was literally in that position in those cases. And I had a sense that these cases that came in my door in early 2018 were just an assignment I had. I just felt a real sense of destiny with those cases. And I felt like, even though other fine lawyers had turned them down, these cases were for me, and they were literally career-changing cases for me because of the magnitude and the obstruction, the defense shenanigans, the 20 motions I won. I won over $26,000 in monetary sanctions. I got an evidentiary sanction. I won punitive damages in all 3 cases against all 3 defendants. I mean, to the punitive damage hearing, they brought 6 different lawyers, and there I was, by myself. And I think that the guys, sometimes the more successful guys whose names are in the firms, they will never have this happen to them. We're often underestimated, I think, as women. I think oftentimes in those cases, I think the defense underestimated my ability to bring these cases home. And I kept trying to get co-counsel to come aboard, and I didn't get co-counsel till late in the game, and by that time I had done all these depots. I had taken...
But what's beautiful about that is if they ever saw your name on pleadings again, they would never underestimate you the second time, right?
Yeah, I love it when they say, she's inexperienced, or, I mean, we know we're going to have fun when we're underestimated, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
So we're running out of time, so I want to ask you a question that I ask all my guests, and that is, if someone comes to you, either right out of law school or they're working for a firm, and they say, Jennifer, I'm really thinking it's time to open my own firm, what are the 3 tips that you would give them?
Wow, you didn't even give me warning on this.
I didn't. I totally forgot. I'm sorry.
So this is totally off the cuff. I mean, the first thing I would say, is to do it. I mean, I don't tend to live with regrets. I think that even the mistakes I make end up, being bringing some kind of good about, but I would say to do it. And that's the one thing I wish I would have started my law firm sooner. I just didn't know how much business getting ability I had. I didn't know how much fun it would be. I didn't know how liberating it would be to let go of all that fear.
Yeah.
And so I would just say do it. The second thing I would say is be a mentor and have one. Everybody needs a mentor or 2, or maybe a number of mentors, and everybody, no matter what your stage, I think needs to mentor someone else. I mean, you don't have to... You can be a law student and mentor a college student who wants to go to law school. I mean, I would say that. And then I would say just to be really honest about what you're going through, because you don't need to make all the mistakes. You don't have time to make all the mistakes there are to make. And as I said at the beginning,
so don't be proud.
Don't
humble,
be proud.
Take
It's a matter
of someone else.
It's a matter of pride. And if you learn from other people's mistakes by really being honest, it took me 2 years to learn to be honest about how slow I was in getting my firm started. But that liberated me then to realize, I'm in an elite group of people that have the courage to do this.
Yes. Thank you for saying that, because that's how I feel. I do feel like it takes a lot of, it's not for the weak. And I told you that on the phone. And it's not for the weak. I really do feel that if you are dedicated to it, it is impossible to fail. And really, what is a smarter investment to make than on yourself?
Right.
If you aren't even willing to bet on yourself, why should anybody else? And I would have been the first person to say, I'm not smart enough to open my own firm. I waited 10 years to do it because I didn't think that. But then you get to a point in life where you're like, well, I have no more, I'm out of options. I have no more choices. And you have to, it's better to come up with the confidence now to bet on yourself than it is to be put in a position where you literally have no other choice. Right? And please, for the people who might want to follow up with you or send you medical malpractice cases, tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, so my email address is jrj@jenniferjohnsonlaw.com. I pay generous referral fees. I love to work with people. I love to co-counsel with people. I have a number of young lawyers that send me cases, and I have other more experienced lawyers that I work together with. I just love to collaborate. And of course, being a solo practitioner can be very isolating.
Yeah.
And so I love my family over at 9210 Irvine Center Drive, the Tort Fort we refer to, and my friends there, we often co-counsel. And so 714-884-4197 is my phone number. And, you know, I love to mentor people. I love to collaborate. I love to, you know, to share my experience with getting my own firm started.
Man, thank you so much for your time today. It was so good. I love meeting new people, and then I hear these like amazing stories, and it just gives so much more depth to just the name. So thank you for taking the time.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm really honored.
Yeah, absolutely.
Honored. And by the way, we did not.
Oh, we did not plan this.
We didn't coordinate our outfits.
That's funny. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining this week's edition of Level Up with Laiken. Sending you lots of love, joy, and success this week. We will see you soon.